Welcome back to lesson 9. My name is Unwanted, and we're going to get more and more practical in our little Photoshop lessons. Lesson 9 is called Removing Unwanted Elements. So I'm going to show you a couple of techniques how to get rid of certain elements in your picture. And I would like to start with any image just to show you some of the basic techniques. So the first thing is, and that might sound a little stupid, a really simple technique, and that I'll call it copy and paste. So if you want to get rid of a certain element, let's say I want to get rid of the buildings above the wall here. One way would be to copy a piece of clean background and just bring it over onto the area that I want to remove it. One thing when we start editing an image is important, and that is that we stay non-destructive. So we're never going to destroy the background or the original image. So right away I'm going to start with duplicating the background layer, and to make sure the background layer stays locked, and I'm also going to turn it off. So I'm going to start with a copy of the background layer actually. So let's zoom in a little bit into the area that I want to work with. I'm going for 100%, and here is the area that I want to get rid of, so all the houses here, including the people and the fence or the handrail that you see there. So the first thing is, if you pick a piece of background, you simply can use a rectangular marquee tool. There is one thing, and I'll show you quickly before I do it. You just select a rectangular piece, use copy paste, so Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and when you then move the new item that you pasted in on a new layer of, obviously, you can see that it has a soft edge. The reason for that being, at the moment when you copied it in the rectangular marquee tool, you saw that I had a feather of 5 pixels. Usually, or the default value here is 0 pixels, or if you have changed it and the change stays. I usually prefer the 0 pixel, which means whenever I copy something and I'm going to pick another piece of the blue background, let me get rid of this one. So I'm selecting another piece, blue background, copy paste, and now when I move it, you can see it has sharp edges. I usually prefer the sharp edges, although when I move the sharp edges to a different position, and I'm going to do it like to a location here, you can always see it, or it's easy to spot where is the copy and where is the background. So that's why I usually soften up the edge later on. Of course, I'm not moving it up here. If I stay down there, it should match in color. So let's do that like with a little bit more precision. So I just need to cover this piece. So I'm going to select and don't go too far over here, but I'm going to select a rectangle piece that is somewhere here. It doesn't have to have the right size. It can be a little bit smaller. You can change the size later on. That is quite simple. So I'm selecting a piece here, and I'm going for Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. Now I'm moving to my Move tool. The shortcut for the Move tool is something that you should remember, that is V. So whenever you are in any other tool with V, you can get back to move. And now I'm going to move my copy and move it on top of the building that I would like to cover. Then, next thing is, if it's too small and if you want to cover more, you can use Ctrl-T for transform and transform it, make it larger or smaller. In this case, I'm not going to transform it in all directions, but just horizontally. That's why you see when I move it, it's scaling up in all directions. If you hold the Shift key, it will only scale in one direction. Just to make sure that the last building that I want to get rid of, not this roof here, just the last building here, is still included. If you now hit enter, you can start to see the edge here, but this is what we're going to soften up later using a layer mask. Why layer mask? Also, the next thing is I want to keep all the parts of the wall, of course, and that's what I use a layer mask for too. So let's turn off the blue piece for a moment. I'm going to use the zoom tool. I'm zooming in to 200%, and now I'm drawing with a with a polygon lasso tool, I'm drawing a selection that includes the wall. So use a polygon lasso tool. I'm starting somewhere down here, and I'm just with a few clicks, and I'm not going to spend too much time on those things, guys. So if you have all the time in the world, but I just want to do it quickly. So I'm also including this piece over here. Maybe I'll need it later. So here's the selection. That is parts that I want to keep. And now when I turn on my sky, you can see that there is an area that has to go away. So this piece of the blue part has to go away. That's why we take the blue piece and give the layer a layer mask. The button that looks like the flag of Japan adds a layer mask. And unfortunately, while something was selected, I keep the selection and not the other part. Actually, what I want is the reverse effect of it. So I want in my mask everything to be white, but this part to be black. So I just click on the mask and I use Ctrl-I for invert. So I'm inverting the mask, and now see the area is gone. Of course, I would have to spend more time in inverting here, but you can imagine how that works. I just want to show you how to get rid of this edge here. So right now I'm having a sharp edge here that shows up. So I'm just going into my mask. I'm using a brush tool. Shortcut is B. Don't use a large brush like this, but make sure the brush has soft edges. So I'm going to use the soft edge brush and adjust my pixel size so that it actually works. I have to paint in black in order to get rid of the layer. So I will show you like this. I have to paint in black. The shortcut for switching those colors is X on your keyboard. So I'm painting in black, but not just anything by hand. Undo that. I just, it has soft edges. So I make sure that the pen, that the brush is slightly taking the edge away, and I click once here, and then I move up and I hit Shift, click one more time. See, that softens the edge. I'm also going to do it up here. So one click here, Shift, another click there, and now I have soft edges. And just to make sure, I'm also going to do it over here. Okay, don't soften up the edge there because you want to have a sharp edge towards the wall. In detail, you can later on make sure it's not that a linear line, but it's so far in the background. See, there's some things that look a little weird from my quick selection. But for right now, that's good. Okay, so you before and after, so you have still a good chance to cover it with a piece of sky. If the sky or the element that you move from a different area here is like a slightly too dark or slightly too bright, it doesn't have to be sky. It can be street or some other background, part of a building. If it is a different color, you can also brighten or darken the area with different adjustment layers. So what you can do is you can go for levels, for example. Levels actually brightens and darkens, of course, the whole stack of layers. If you want to make sure that only only the one layer below is affected, then you have to, of course, hit this clipping button there. Then it only affects the one layer below. And if you now take a look what happens if you move the black point, it turns brighter. In our case, it has it probably fits more on the other, so you can move it both ways. You can also start to move those things in, and you can also shift the midpoint slightly, which in this case really like a little bit helps, I think. So yeah, not sure if we need that. Yeah, we can also try all kinds of different layers. You can add curves to it, so add an adjustment layer curves, darken it by, of course, again, clip again, darken it or brighten it up. But in this case, it is almost perfect without any adjustment layer. And it is far in the background. Remember, we are in 200% right now. So let's get back out and have a look at some other ways to get rid of unwanted elements. And So we got the copy paste to just take some clean background, move it over to a different area, or if you don't have an area large enough, you can just select one piece, copy paste it, and then scale it or transform it smaller or larger. The next one, and this is something that is working in all kinds of situations, and that is the clone stamp tool. The clone stamp tool, I'm going to do it here, let's say with the wall there. There's a couple of things that elements that we can remove, some holes in the wall. The clone stamp tool. Again, we want to stay non-destructive, so we want to make sure whatever we clone stamp will be on an extra layer. Later on we can merge those layers. But I'm going to create another layer here, hit on the plus button, here's my layer. And now what is important when you use the clone stamp tool, it's there. The clone stamp tool allows you to pick pixel information from one location and copy it to another location. So the copying is with Alt, then you have the little crosshair, you define where to pick it from. I'm going to show you to pick it from a totally different location. I'm going to pick some water down on the bottom left side, Alt click here. This is the source file, and the destination you just get by painting with your brush. Of course, the brush size, the brush shape has all kinds of things to do with that. Let me undo that. But what is important? You want to have your changes on an extra layer. So you have to make sure you are on an extra layer, not on the area where you pick the color from, but on an extra layer. And then here it says sample. And sample, I think by default, is on current layer. So it means you can only pick pixels from one layer and place it on the same layer. But on the same layer, you are overriding the original one. So what you need to do is you create a new one and then choose current and below. That in this case would be fine. So it finds all the pixels on all layers below. What I usually do is I just go to all layers. Because if there is a layer that I don't want to have cloned, for example this one, it's only a local layer, but you can always turn it off and on. So in this case I'm on the empty layer, I am sampling all layers, so I'm picking pixel information from all layers and I'm placing it on my new layer. So that means I can anytime turn the change on and off. So let's close those holes, pick color information from right next to it, and then just paint over it. If there is certain specific patterns of bricks and so on, then you maybe have to do it a couple times. Pick here, and so on and so on. Also, if you want to paint, want to paint something else like brushes or trees or some other plants, you can also pick a different brush. So not only the regular round brushes, but there's all kinds of brushes there, either from this list that I get with a right click, or you can also pick the brushes up here. When you click brushes, it opens all your all kinds of brushes. Brushes, by the way, can also be found on the internet, and you can download all kinds of different brushes. One other thing that is important with the clone stamp tool, here's another thing that opens additional information. For example, if you have certain brushes or certain offset sizes and so on, you can also define them here when you want to use them later on. But what is more important, you can also mirror something. For example, I'm going to copy, I'm not overriding, but I'm copy the window here. And here's a button that I can click, and now the copy will be mirrored. So when I start picking here and I am painting over here, then I can paint a mirrored version of it. Of course, the shadow won't work. See, it has a different shadow, but it looks as if the different window over here would be a mirrored one. That is because I used this mirror function. Usually it's not mirrored, so when I pick this one and I paint it over here, then obviously I don't want it to be mirrored, but like this. All those windows are on extra layers, so you can anytime turn it on and off. Doesn't matter if you overwrite unwanted elements or clone wanted elements. This is something that has where you get additional information. Okay, so those are the brushes and the extra clone stamp panel here. Okay, all layers is also important. Usually I paint with 100% opacity because I can always change the opacity of the whole layer later. I'm not gonna paint in 50% opacity. I'd rather do it in 100 and then lower it, because if I paint in 50%, I cannot increase it later on. Okay, so far in the next example, we're going to combine all those things to get a nice result. The next thing is, let me get rid of the layer that I did, or turn it off, doesn't matter. The next thing is the spot healing brush. The spot healing brush tool is, where's the spot healing? It's above the clone stamp over here. The top one from this spot healing brush tool. It is made for little errors in a certain pattern, and that will be filled. Sometimes it works, and sometimes when you really need it, it just doesn't work. It's made for little errors, for example, little dark spots here, or if you have a bird in the sky that you want to get rid of, that is a clone stamp tool. I'll show you quickly. Let's get a brush here, and I'm doing something that I shouldn't do. I'm on the original background here, and I use a blue color that just places a bird or whatever that is, a spot. This spot really is on the layer. There's no chance to get it back, to remove it, unless with all the tools that we do right now. Copy paste, or with a clone stamp, or with the spot healing tool. So you choose the spot healing tool. Again, you use a brush that size fits, and I usually also use a brush with soft edges, and then you just paint over it. Make sure you use a little bit more of the area, and when you let it go, it's gone. So that's for all kinds of spots. Spots can be even as large as a window. So here, for example, would be a window, and there it is. But be aware, I did a change that affected the background, also this one, and one of the first things I said, we try not to destroy the background. So instead of doing that, let me quickly undo it. Always make sure that you use a new layer when you use the clone stamp tool. The spot healing tool. So here's my new layer, but when I use the spot healing brush tool, I also have to make sure that I sample all layers, because otherwise I would work on an empty layer and it wouldn't find anything to remove. So hit sample all layers, and then when you paint over it, for example, a spot like the window, it will be removed, but it will be removed on an extra layer. So the removed part is on an extra layer, and you can anytime turn it on and off. So the same thing here. Here's a kind of window that I want to remove, and so on. So you can see that it starts painting some things that you might recognize. So the larger it is, the more it doesn't work. So it's just for small spots that you see. For example, at those holes in the wall, that is what the spot healing tool is made for. See, it doesn't look that good, so maybe the clone stamp would work better. So sample all layers is what you need here, and an extra layer. Okay, not much to do about this. It's perfect for fixing things on faces. Remove some spots from your face or from other body parts. That is what it's actually made for. The next one, and that is a really powerful tool, is if you want to remove really large portions of an image. And I'll show you something here. Zoom out. If I want to remove this whole island, the whole rock here, and maybe even the rock there, because it was used to be, that's Dubrovnik, by the way, and that used to be the old harbor here, so they had really protected harbor, and that is something that you can easily remove. Let's remove the rock. The only thing that we need to take care of is this part here. So to use the content that we are filling you need to make. Now you're changing the picture, because you cannot do it on an empty layer with hitting sample all pixels. You have to do it in one original layer. So anyway, we have a copy of the background, so we can change the background here anyway if we want the rock back. it's there on the background image. So first you start by selecting the layer that you want to change and zoom in a bit, 100% maybe, yes. And now you use any selection tool, for example the lasso tool. Also, you want to have a little feathering there. I'm not going to do too much, but let's go for 3 pixels. So that's not a sharp selection, but it has a 3 pixel wide feather. And now you draw a selection around your objects. Make sure you include the rock down there. You don't need to go too close to the object, but just also not waste too much space. So there it is. Okay, and now all you need to do is fill it, not with a color, but so-called content aware. That can be done with edit fill. Where is it? Here, edit fill. I usually don't do it this way because when you are in any selection tool, doesn't matter which lasso or which rectangle, as long as you are in a selection tool, you can do a right click and then it will offer fill. Okay, so edit fill or right click fill. And on right-click fill, you don't choose black, white, or gray, or any color, but content aware. Make sure its color adaptation is turned on, and hit OK. Takes a while, and there it is. See, it looks really good. Let me get rid of the selection. It looks really good, especially in this area, so that the color is really good. Maybe we want to adjust a little bit here. And that's it. So you always have to combine your content aware change before and after here, before, after. And of course you have to spend some time to get the new coastline there. You can pick all kinds of rocks from all kinds of positions. But let's fix the a little bit here. I would go for a clone stamp tool. So I don't need to put it on an extra layer because I already have changed the background layer. So I'm using a soft edge brush, a little bit larger, that's good. And I'm using Alt, pick something from here and just bring some of the nice waves in there to cover the kind of blurry waves from there. Also from this side. So just, in this case, you can also, of course, place it, as I said before, on an extra layer and then bring it back. Next thing, up here, the rock. So you just have to make sure that you build a sharp line between water and rocks, and you can pick it from wherever you want. So if it has to be of those brown area, then you can pick it from over there. If it has to be more of the shadow piece thing, shadow and darker area, that you can bring it from over there. If you want some specific features that are like a little rock sticking out there, you can use that. And to fix the rock on top, doesn't matter where you pick it from, just make sure you use different positions. Okay, that's good. Perfect. Remember, we are way zoomed in, so now there's a bright spot. See, I messed up this one. Alt. There it is. So when you zoom out, it's as good as new. Also here, you could go with some larger brush, but I think it looks quite natural. Okay, the two others I turned off. Changes here. Okay, so the content-aware filling for large areas. It again doesn't work for everything, but for some occasion it works quite well. That's it for the techniques. Let's get to a different picture and repeat some of the techniques in an example. I'm going to close this one. I'm not going to save it. Oh, by the way, part of not overriding your original is also not to save it as a JPEG, but that is simple. As soon as you have more than one layer and you go to File, Save As, or even Save, it will not save it as a JPEG, but it will offer a Photoshop file, PSD, and that means you are never overwriting your original. As soon as you have more than one layer, it will not save it as a JPEG unless you say flatten. Yes, then it's will save it as a JPEG. So I'm not gonna save those changes obviously to my picture. The next thing is this one. Also a simple Tuscany little village. Here's a few things that kind of disturb my eye. The first thing is the traffic sign here that is really prominent in colors that don't show up anywhere else. There's some additional street signs there. And there's also some part of 21st century. So there's some, no, that's maybe 20th century. There's some antennas. There's some lights that you can remove. You can also, there's a surveillance camera, so you can also remove some of the elements to make it more of the cozy medieval look. So let's start with the traffic sign. So I'm going to zoom in to 100%, and for this, in this case, I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. So get a new layer. Get the clone stamp tool, make sure it's set to sample all layers because I want it on the empty, but I want to make sure that the pixels come from the other layer. My brush is of a good size and maybe a bit larger. It has soft edges, that's good. Oops, sorry. And now you start picking with Alt and placing with click. So make sure you also keep the shadow from underneath the roof here. Get some, I'm not gonna do it, you know, let's speed it up a bit. Oops, sorry, green stuff. Also when they're going down. So, and then we have some of the rocks. Also make sure you remove the shadow, and down here so, the shadow. Good. Maybe some of the, so like this. And perfect. In the background, it's even smaller, so there's no need to spend too much time on that. If you want to avoid painting over the street, then you can also, of course, use a selection tool. So I'm going to use a selection. I just select the area that I want to work in. So I'm not going to do anything down here. Then use, again, the clone stamp tool. You need a smaller brush, obviously. And you pick from one and then paint it over the other. Okay, like this. Also, here's some okay, that's enough. We are really far in the background. We want to do it really quick. The antenna, obviously, it's a blue sky. I'm here at 100%. Blue sky, so the best method, of course, is to pick a piece of clean sky. Here, copy. Oh, sorry, you have to be on the right layer to copy something. Copy paste. See, I did not even clone the background. Duplicate it because I'm not going to change the background anyway. Take the copy, move it over your antenna. Oh, almost too small. Doesn't matter. Select, Control T for transform, and make it slightly larger. So there it is. Now, again, I'm not going to spend too much time. I'll give the layer, here's my blue that covers everything, give the layer a layer mask, and with a brush I paint in black on the layer mask and paint away the things I need. So again, I'm doing it really quickly. Here's my chimney. Okay, not too much time. Here's black. And that's it. If you have those edges that you see, don't forget to paint with a, oops, sorry, with a soft brush and paint away those edges slightly. Good. Here's the thing that I painted over. Let's do one more here. From here to here, soften it up, or from here to shift here. Good. There it is. perfectly covered. There's a little cloud there, but it looks weird. There's a cloud from here. And the last thing is, of course, any details that you can use with, again, the clone stamp tool. For example, things like here's a surveillance camera. Use the clone stamp tool and pick their pixels from somewhere below, like at this edge, and then paint it over at the other edge. Also, if you want to get rid of this piece, you can try spot healing. Let's see how that works. Usually I try spot healing first. Good. Also here's a shadow. Good. And then I paint away a few things by hand. For example, here, pick and so. Good. And there's other things that you can remove here, 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 here. Okay, that's not, I think that's most of the things we do. I'm going to show you one more thing, and that is when I zoom out and you're satisfied with your result and you want this all in one layer, what you can do is you can just flatten it with image flatten image. Sorry, layer flatten image. That will flatten all your layers down into one, or you can do it by hand with merging the layers and so on. Let me quickly do that, because what I want to show you is here's a filter that's called lens correction. Later on, when we talk about how to generally improve your photos, that is another lesson that's coming up. Here is a quick fix for this picture. If you look at the picture, then you will notice my rulers are on. If I drag out a ruler, you'll notice that the vertical lines of this building are not vertical, because I was looking up. You know, I was not looking level, I was looking up, and that means the buildings fall towards the, it's a perspective distortion. So when I pull it out, you can also see that here the straight lines, the pipes going down, they are not straight anymore, and so on and so on. So to fix that, you can use a filter, lens correction. This is just for small fits, and when you use the lens correction, sorry, it opens in another window over here. You have a grid that you should turn on. So here's a grid. The grid size can be adjusted, but it just should give you an idea how the vertical lines are. In this case, they are perspectively distorted because I was looking up. Then you switch you can also do automatic correction if you have certain camera, model, and so on, a lens, but better is the custom lens correction, especially when you want to do transform vertical and horizontal perspective. And here it is, the vertical perspective, and I'm showing you what it does. So it changes the vertical perspective when you look, but you can only fix little amounts. And in this case, it is only a little amount. So it is minus 12 looks good. So it looks good over here. Look straight here. There is a little distortion in it as well, so I'm going to fix that as well. You know, the wide lenses usually give you a little distortion that you can fix with remove distortion into the pin cushion or the barrel effect. So this way goes more towards like a barrel, and this is called pin cushion, so it's like a pillow or when you put pins in it. So it's a minus plus 5 in this case, and it's maybe too much. No, it's good. That's it. And here's a little bit of vertical perspective change there. If you do this, I usually prefer to scale it down a little bit, or when I know before, I usually scale it up before. So I give it some space around it. Why? Because you lose a lot of things there, and when I move the scale down a bit, I'll get the parts of the image back. And now if I hit OK, and I'll end up in Photoshop again. The changes of course applied. You can see the lines now, it fits. Let me quickly get rid of the guidelines, and now I can use whatever tool I want for, in this case I'm using the crop tool to crop the image. So it doesn't matter what you use it for. If you want to use it for social media and something like this, maybe you want to go for a square image or something like this. But just make sure that the things that you lost here due to the change of the distortion and change of the vertical perspective, that you don't show them. Okay? Enter, and there it is. Okay, that was a little example that combined some of the elements, and we've already reached half an hour. Let me give you like one more example, and that is, here's another example shot in Racine, Wisconsin. That is Frank Lloyd Wright's Johnson Wax Company, the very famous glass skyrise. That was the research tower. It's now accessible up to the first or to the second floor. And here's a few things. Bad picture. Again, I was not looking level. How can you tell? If you look at the picture, where do you think is the horizon? The horizon would be my height in the picture. And if I would have to draw a line, where is my height? Usually then here, it would be here somewhere, right? If I would walk with my camera there, the camera would be somewhere here. And that would be the horizon. That means if I would look level, the horizon would be in the middle of the picture. So the horizon should be right there, but it is actually, it's here. That is where the perspective lines all meet. Everything that is in perspective meets on the horizon. What did I do? I looked upwards. So the camera is tilted upwards, and that means again I have a perspective distortion. Why am I showing you this? Because, for example, if I want to get rid of those ventilation shafts here, the openings, then I'm running into problems when I'm using the same techniques that I've shown you before. Why? Because they are in perspective, and you can see there's already the small lines are typical for Frank Lloyd Wright. Let me get rid of the guides quickly and zoom in. So when you look at the 100% at the brick walls here, and you can see that there is a big emphasis on horizontal lines. And Frank Lloyd Wright did this by making the horizontal gaps, the mortar gaps, larger than the vertical ones. And in addition to that, the horizontal ones are painted in a sandstone or used sandstone mortar, and the verticals are painted in brick color, so that they look as if there is nothing there. So when you look close, you can see here, but when the sun is shining, you almost don't see the brick gaps there. It all has these horizontal stripes. And now if I take a look and I want to get rid of these elements here, I cannot just copy paste a piece of clean lines there and move it over, because in perspective the lines are getting smaller the more you get to the back. Or I cannot use a clone stamp tool, because I would clone something bigger to a position where it's smaller and it would not fit. The best way to do this is actually to use a rectangle selection tool with a slight feather of, let's say, 2, so it's not a sharp edge. Then you select a clean piece of bricks next to the ventilation shaft, copy paste it. That means I'm not ruining the background. And now I'm moving it over, and I will find out that the perspective won't fit because it's smaller there. So you need to change, you need to scale it down. Control T, and now scale it down till it fits again. And there it is. See? Here, now it's too small for here, but it fits perfectly to place it on top of this ventilation shaft. I'm going to do again, Control V. I have the same copy one more time. I can also place it there and so on. Please do not take something from the top and bring it down to the bottom, because also the perspective, you see the lines change. You need to use it right next to the, pick it right next to the place where you want to place it. So yeah, I'm doing this one in the back here. If you want to do the one in the back, just make sure you pick it right next there. Copy, paste, oops, sorry, wrong layer. Copy, paste, and then move it over. Adjust the top You can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard, adjust that the lines on the top matched and the bottom is way off, and then I use Ctrl T for transform, and I scale it down so that it fits. Now let's a little bit more to the right, and we're done. Okay, there's also another tool. Let me quickly remove that. The other tool that I'm showing you is you can actually use a clone stamp tool in perspective, and that is called the Vanishing Point tool. Vanishing Point is important. You put it on a new layer. So I'm going to create a new empty layer. I'm on the empty layer, and then I am using Filter Vanishing Point. Vanishing Point is the point where perspective lines meet somewhere outside of your picture. So that's the Vanishing Point. And the Vanishing Point also opens in a new window. And in Vanishing Point, and I'm going to do it real quick, maybe there's some time in a different lesson. Vanishing Point means you have to define a plane in perspective first. So here's the plane tool, and I'm start using this corner, then I'm dragging it in perspective. I'm watching the perspective here where the last brick is seen, like here and here. And now it's red, and that means I didn't do the perspective well. Let me zoom in a bit. Now with the edit plane tool, I can adjust my points. So make sure they are at the right points in perspective. This one's off. Yes, now we are closer. It's not red anymore. And now you can see it finds the perspective right there. Once the perspective plane is blue, then it finds the right perspective. Of course, you can place it on all kinds of planes. And now here's a clone stamp tool. It's called Stamp Tool, but it's the same thing. With Alt, you can pick colors. So for example, I'm picking some bricks far away from those parts. Let me zoom in a little bit. So now with the clone stamp tool, I can select colors, Alt, click far from it here, and then I move it, and you can see in perspective the painting gets smaller, and I can paint it wherever I need it, and there it is, see? And I can paint in perspective on top of it. Or even here, see? It allows me to paint all three at the same. I wouldn't do that, but I will just rather go here, pick again with Alt, and then move it, place it here. So there it is. So with this, you can paint in perspective. Once you hit OK, you can see that my paintings are on the new layer, just like before we had sample all layers on the new layer, and everything else is on the background. Okay? So that is the perspective thing in change. Though if you want to get rid of the crane, that is plain clone stamp tool, I guess, or the sky is really simple to remove, and then you have a nice picture. I'm not going to remove more than that. Right now, I'm not going to interested in that. Let me remove the changes one more time, because the last thing I would like to show you is, again, a little fix of the perspective change, because right now, see, if I drag out a line, that I can see that the glass tower is perspectively distorted. It's smaller on the top than it is on the bottom, and professional architecture photography doesn't do that. They're all vertical. Also here the lines, you can see there's a lot of distortion in those walls. Maybe they are not really straight anymore. And here in the back you can see it the most, that the vertical line is not vertical. So the back, we will lose this piece anyway here when we change the perspective. And what I said before, I rather, instead of using scale before, what I usually do is I take the layer from the background, open the lock so that it's a regular layer, and now I'm going to use a white background, and I'm going to use image and canvas size. So I'm going to add a little bit of canvas on the left, on the right, top and bottom. So maybe let's say 10% on each side. So I'm going to switch width and height to percent, and I'm going to make width 120% and also height 120%. When you use canvas size, you're not changing the image size, but you're adding it to it. Oh, it's anyway transparent. So I get 10% more on every side. And now when I do my perspective change, I will not lose anything because this will move up and this will straighten out. So I'm not gonna lose anything from the process. Here it is, filter, lens correction, custom lens correction. It's again the same vertical perspective that I need to change to get the straight lines straight. This time it's much more, so I have to do a lot of change. I showed you before with the horizon because it was way off. So also the whole picture is slightly leaning. And here it is a very small angle, but you can see it. The tower is leaning a little bit towards the right. Actually, it's just 0.5, oh, the other way, minus 0.5 degrees. Yes, see, I tried it before. Here is minus 0.5, and now we have straight lines here. We got a straight line there, maybe a little bit of, because it's a wide, it's an iPhone, there's a little bit of distortion there. Let's bring that back. Just really a little bit. And that's it, okay. So, and now I can go in and fix the area that I want to use. So I can now use the crop tool. Of course, I will probably lose the edge here, which I don't like, and I will lose some of this area, but in order to get make sure you keep enough sky above the tower, make sure you resize it on both sides, and probably we should go for a square image anyway, in this case. If you want to have it square, you can also change a fixed aspect ratio. Here it is, square. Let's do a square image without the chimney. And when you look at the square image, there's 3 lines that give you it's called the rule of thirds. So you kind of split up both horizontal and vertical into those rule of thirds, and you get those sweet spots. And when you want something interesting, you just place it at the center of one of those lines. Then you, or for example, the horizon on one of them, then you have a nice composition without knowing a lot about composition. There it is, and get rid of the guides. And here's my image of Johnson Wax by Frank Lloyd Wright. Okay, my name is Arnold Faller. That was lesson number 9. Sorry for the length. I hope you stayed all the way to the end. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.